The restaurant buzzed with the usual evening energy, the clinking of glasses, murmurs of conversations, and soft background music blending into a familiar symphony. Among the waiters and waitresses moving swiftly between tables, one young woman stood out, not for any flashy uniform or special position, but for the quiet intensity in her eyes. She moved with precision, carrying trays of food and drinks, greeting regular guests with a warm smile. Yet there was something more within her, a spark that wasn't visible to most. It was a passion she kept mostly to herself, a secret the polished tables and the gleaming silverware could never reveal. She had been working at this restaurant for a couple of years now. Each day started early, often before the sun rose, and ended late, long after the last guests had gone home. Her hands were skilled at balancing plates and pouring drinks, but what she longed for was the piano, the instrument that had been her companion for as long as she could remember. The restaurant had a grand piano tucked away in the corner, often overlooked by the patrons, who were too busy with their own conversations or meals. To her, it was not just a piece of furniture. It was a doorway to another world, one where she could forget the weight of responsibilities and immerse herself in music. Growing up, she had learned to play the piano with her mother, who had always believed that music could be a refuge in difficult times. Her mother wasn't rich and she couldn't afford formal lessons, so the girl had taught herself as much as she could from old music books and by listening carefully to pieces on the radio. She remembered sitting on a worn stool, fingers pressing the keys gently at first, hesitant but eager, learning the melodies by heart. Music had become a friend, a voice that spoke when words failed, a companion that never judged her or demanded anything in return. Even now, in the bustling restaurant, the memories of those quiet afternoons came rushing back every time she glanced at the piano. She would sometimes imagine herself sitting there, letting her fingers float over the keys, creating sounds that could move people, stories told without words. But reality was different. She was a waitress, and in the world she inhabited now, dreams often had to wait until the kitchen was quiet, the floors cleaned, and the guests gone. Yet, the thought of music lingered, persistent and comforting, like a gentle hum in the background of her busy life. Tonight was no different. She had spent the afternoon rushing between tables, taking orders, refilling drinks, and ensuring every guest felt attended to. She smiled and nodded, listened carefully to requests, and worked with a quiet efficiency that her manager admired. But inside, there was a small ache, a yearning that no tray of food could satisfy. She longed to feel the keys under her fingers, to hear the music rise and fill the space, to see the reactions of those around her when her music spoke what she could not say. As she moved past the corner where the piano sat, she allowed herself a brief glance. The soft light from the chandelier glinted off the polished wood, and for a moment, she imagined her fingers dancing across the keys. She pictured the notes flowing smoothly, the melodies wrapping around the room, capturing attention, even if just for a few minutes. But she sighed and continued her work, knowing that tonight, like every other night, the piano would remain untouched, waiting patiently for someone to breathe life into it. Her coworkers often joked about her love for music, teasing her about how she would sometimes hum tunes under her breath while serving dishes. They didn't know how deep her connection to music ran, how it had shaped her understanding of the world, how it had given her strength when other parts of life felt uncertain. To them, it was a quirky habit, but to her, it was a lifeline, a reminder that she was more than her job, more than the apron and tray she carried. Despite the long hours and constant movement, she found little moments of solace. A brief pause behind the counter, a quiet corner near the window, or a moment when a guest complimented her on the service could lift her spirits. Yet, the music remained an untouchable dream, a secret part of herself that she nurtured quietly, waiting for the right moment when courage might align with opportunity. Her mind wandered to the people who dined in the restaurant, the wealthy and influential guests who often appeared aloof or absorbed in their own worlds. She wondered if they could ever understand the joy of creating music, the thrill of connecting with an audience through sound alone. She had played in small recitals before, in school or local community events, and had felt the same mix of nervousness and exhilaration each time. But this setting was different. Here, she was just a waitress, and the thought of sitting at the piano in front of these patrons seemed almost impossible. Still, the idea lingered, a small ember in her heart. As the evening progressed, the restaurant became busier, the chatter louder, the clinking of silverware more rhythmic. She navigated the space with practiced ease, balancing trays and remembering orders, all while keeping a mental tally of what each table needed. The work was tiring, but she moved with a quiet determination, aware that her effort mattered, even if it went unnoticed by many. Each completed task, each satisfied guest, added a small sense of accomplishment to the day, but it never quite filled the space left by her unplayed music. During a rare, quiet moment, she found herself near the piano again. The thought of sitting down and playing was stronger now, almost tempting her to abandon her duties for a fleeting escape. She touched the keys lightly, feeling the cool surface under her fingertips. The sound was soft, almost hesitant, as if the piano itself was testing her commitment. She pressed a few notes, letting them resonate gently, and for a brief instant, she felt a wave of peace wash over her. The noise of the restaurant faded, and she was back in those afternoons of her childhood, fingers tracing melodies, heart full of hope. The manager called her name, bringing her back to reality. Orders needed to be served, tables needed attention, and the night was far from over. She stepped away, taking a deep breath, but the memory of the sound lingered. That tiny moment, that brief touch of the piano, reminded her of what she was capable of and what she loved most. It was a spark, small but persistent, that refused to be extinguished. As the night wore on, she continued her work, balancing the demands of the restaurant with the quiet yearning in her heart. She noticed small details others overlooked. A child smiling at the way she placed a plate, a couple exchanging a glance of appreciation, an older guest nodding with approval at her attentive service. These moments, though minor, brought her joy and a sense of connection, yet they were not enough to replace the music she longed to play. Finally, after hours of movement and service, the restaurant began to empty. The guests had gone, leaving behind traces of their presence. Empty glasses, folded napkins, and faint echoes of conversation. She took a moment to walk toward the piano again, feeling the anticipation build in her chest. This time, there were no distractions, no expectations, just her and the instrument. She touched the keys once more, letting the sound flow naturally, feeling it vibrate through her fingers, into her heart. The music was her own, a private celebration of resilience, passion, and hope. In that quiet space, she realized that no matter how ordinary her days seemed, no matter how unnoticed her work often was, she carried something extraordinary within her. The piano, the music, and the courage to dream reminded her that life had moments of magic hidden in the most unexpected places. And though the evening had been like any other in the eyes of the world, for her, it was a reminder that the path to something greater might begin with a single note, played in secret, waiting for the right moment to shine. The next day began much like any other. She woke up early, the faint light of dawn spilling through the thin curtains, and she moved quietly so as not to wake her roommate. Breakfast was quick, a piece of toast and a cup of tea, eaten while she reviewed her day in her mind. There was nothing remarkable planned, just the usual shift at the restaurant, the same tables, the same flow of guests. Yet, a small part of her felt a flutter of anticipation. She could not shake the memory of the piano from the night before. Each note she had pressed seemed to echo in her mind, reminding her of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, her music could reach someone else. When she arrived at work, the restaurant was buzzing with preparations for the evening. The staff moved quickly, arranging chairs, polishing silverware, and checking menus. She hung her apron and stepped onto the floor, ready to face the night ahead. As she passed by the piano, she paused for a moment. The instrument seemed to sit quietly, waiting. She allowed herself a brief smile, touching a key lightly, imagining the sound that would come from it, but she had no time to linger. The work needed her attention. Hours passed quickly. Orders were taken, drinks refilled, plates carried to tables with careful precision. Her feet ached, her back ached, and yet she moved with a practiced rhythm that allowed her to keep going. She could see the wealth and elegance around her. The fine dresses, the sparkling watches, the hushed conversations filled with hidden meanings. Guests smiled politely, nodded approvingly, or occasionally made small talk. She listened politely, but her mind wandered again and again to the piano in the corner. The thought of sitting down and playing in front of these people seemed terrifying, yet thrilling. Then, just before the dinner rush reached its peak, a surprising announcement came. The usual pianist, a man known for his elegant performances and familiar tunes, would not be able to play tonight. A sudden illness had left the restaurant without music, and the manager, slightly panicked, looked around the room, searching for someone who could fill the space. Her heart leapt when she realized what was being suggested. All eyes seemed to turn toward her, even though she had not noticed it. Could it be possible that she was being asked to play? She hesitated. A mixture of fear and excitement churned in her stomach. She was just a waitress, not a professional pianist, but the opportunity was right there in front of her. She swallowed hard, trying to calm her nerves. The manager, noticing her hesitation, encouraged her gently. "I know it's sudden," he said, "but I've seen you near the piano. I know you can play. Will you help us tonight?" She nodded, even though her hands shook slightly. She had not expected this, and the weight of the moment was heavy. Still, deep inside, a small voice urged her forward. This was what she had been waiting for, even if she had not realized it. A chance to share her music, to let her talent breathe outside the walls of her own imagination. Backstage, she took a deep breath and approached the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her touch. She remembered every hour she had spent practicing, every note learned by ear, every melody played quietly at home. And yet, sitting there, in front of an audience she had never performed for, her confidence wavered. Doubts filled her mind. What if she made a mistake? What if they did not appreciate her music? She shook her head slightly, trying to push the fear aside. Music was not about perfection, she reminded herself. It was about feeling, about connection, about speaking in a language that words could never reach. Slowly, she pressed a few notes. The sound filled the quiet corner of the restaurant, gentle and hesitant at first. Heads turned, guests pausing mid-conversation as curiosity drew them toward the source of the music. She felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly as the notes began to flow more naturally. She found a rhythm, a melody that felt right, letting her fingers glide over the keys with increasing confidence. Each chord, each note, carried a piece of herself, a message that she hoped would reach those listening. The guests, initially surprised, began to take notice. Conversation softened, eyes turned toward the piano, and a few leaned slightly forward in their chairs, captivated by the unexpected performance. She noticed the smallest details, the way a glass reflected the soft lights, the way a child's eyes widened in wonder, the subtle nods of appreciation from some of the older guests. Each reaction bolstered her confidence, urging her to continue, to explore the music further. It was a dance between her fingers and the audience, a silent conversation that needed no words. She remembered the stories her mother had told her, about how music could touch hearts, how it could heal and inspire. She thought of the long hours of practice, the dreams whispered to the quiet of her room, and she let all of it pour into her performance. The melodies became richer, more expressive, weaving through the space with an intensity that seemed to still time itself. The nervousness that had gripped her earlier was fading, replaced by a growing joy, a deep sense of purpose. She was not just a waitress anymore. She was a musician, speaking directly to the hearts of those who listened. As the minutes passed, the restaurant transformed around her. The bustling energy softened, replaced by an almost reverent silence. Guests stopped checking their phones, stopped chatting, and allowed themselves to be fully present in the moment. The music carried them away from their routines, their worries, their polite facades, into a space where only the melody mattered. She could see it in the subtle movements, the eyes that glimmered with emotion, the hands that rested on the table, still and attentive. Her heart swelled with a mixture of pride and humility, knowing that her music had achieved something profound. Her mind wandered to the thought that this might be a once-in-a-lifetime moment. She could feel the responsibility, yet she also felt liberated. For the first time, the boundaries between her secret passion and her everyday life seemed to dissolve. She was not performing for judgment or evaluation. She was sharing a piece of herself. The room, filled with people who often seemed distant or preoccupied, was now connected to her through sound and feeling. It was a rare, magical exchange that left her both exhilarated and grounded. When she finally concluded the piece, there was a pause, a quiet breath held by everyone in the room. The soft echoes of the last note lingered, as if reluctant to leave. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the restaurant. At first gentle, then growing in warmth and intensity, the clapping acknowledged not only her skill but the courage it had taken to step forward. She looked up, a little overwhelmed, and saw smiles, nods, and even some guests wiping their eyes. The power of music, she realized, was undeniable. It could speak across social boundaries, touch souls, and create moments of shared humanity. The manager approached, a mixture of relief and admiration in his expression. "That was incredible," he said quietly. "I knew you had it in you, but this was something special." She nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Compliments and smiles came from other staff members and some guests who approached after the performance. Yet, she remained humble, focusing more on the experience itself than the praise. The joy she felt came from knowing that she had dared to take a chance, that she had transformed a normal evening into something memorable, something meaningful. Later, after the restaurant had quieted down and the last guests had left, she returned to the piano alone. This time, there was no nervousness, no hesitation, only the pure joy of playing. She allowed herself to explore, to experiment, to lose herself in the music without concern for perfection or approval. The notes seemed to dance effortlessly beneath her fingers, carrying away the fatigue of the long day and filling her with a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that her love for music was not just a private comfort. It had the power to touch lives, to create connection, to transform ordinary moments into something extraordinary. That night, as she finally left the restaurant and walked home under the quiet glow of streetlights, she felt different. The world seemed a little larger, a little more open, filled with possibilities she had not dared to imagine before. She thought about the guests, the applause, the stillness of the room as the music flowed through it, and she smiled softly. Courage, she realized, was not the absence of fear but the decision to act in spite of it. And in that small but unforgettable moment, she had chosen to act. The piano, once a silent witness to her private dreams, had become a bridge to the world outside, and she had crossed it with quiet grace and determination. The evening arrived with a quiet tension in the air, the kind that made every sound sharper, every movement more deliberate. She felt it too, the fluttering in her chest that came from knowing she would soon face an audience unlike any she had ever performed for. The restaurant was filled with wealthy patrons, their conversations carrying a low hum over the clinking of glasses and silverware. She moved among them as usual, taking orders and refilling drinks, yet every step seemed heavier, weighed down by the anticipation of what was to come. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to steady them, reminding herself that she had faced nervous moments before. This was different, though. This was bigger. This mattered in a way that went beyond serving food. Then the moment came. The usual pianist had not arrived, and the manager, with a hint of desperation in his eyes, approached her. He asked if she could play, and though her heart skipped a beat, she nodded. There was no time to think, no time to question whether she was ready. All she could do was walk toward the grand piano that stood at the corner of the room, polished and waiting. As she approached, she could feel the eyes of the patrons upon her, though no one said a word. The weight of their attention pressed down on her shoulders, but it also sparked something inside, a small flame of courage that urged her forward. Sitting at the piano, she placed her fingers lightly on the keys, feeling the cool surface beneath them. Her mind flashed with memories of the hours she had spent practicing, learning each note, each melody, each emotion that could be expressed through sound. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, and let her fingers rest gently before pressing down the first keys. The sound was soft at first, tentative, almost as if testing the room to see how it would respond. She could hear the faint murmur of conversation pause, heads turning subtly toward the music. Encouraged, she allowed the melody to flow more confidently, letting her fingers move naturally across the keys, each note carrying a piece of herself into the room. The initial surprise of the patrons gave way to a quiet curiosity. Some leaned forward in their chairs, others stopped mid-bite, and a few children grew still, captivated by the unexpected performance. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, not from the attention, but from the realization that her music had the power to reach people. The nervousness that had gripped her began to ease, replaced by a steady focus and a growing joy. She was creating something real, something that could touch hearts and minds in a way that words alone could not. As she continued to play, the room seemed to change. The background noise of conversations and laughter faded, replaced by a shared stillness, a collective focus on the music. She noticed the subtle details, the way a guest's eyes glimmered with emotion, the gentle nods of heads in rhythm with her melodies, the soft smiles that appeared as if the music had unlocked a quiet pleasure. Each note seemed to carry its own story, weaving through the air and connecting everyone in the room in a moment that was both intimate and universal. She could feel the music bridging the gap between herself and the patrons, dissolving the social distance that usually separated them. The first piece she played was gentle, simple, yet full of emotion. She let it build gradually, layering more complex chords and shifting melodies as her confidence grew. Her fingers moved with increasing freedom, guided by instinct as much as by memory. She felt herself becoming part of the music, not just playing it, but living it. Each note was a heartbeat, each chord a breath, and with every passing moment, she felt a deep connection with those listening. The room, once filled with casual chatter and polite smiles, had become a space of shared experience, a quiet world where music spoke louder than any words. A small child at one of the tables stopped fidgeting and watched her intently, eyes wide with wonder. She noticed a couple holding hands, their fingers tightening as if the music had touched something deep within them. An older man nodded slightly, his expression softening, as if the melodies had reminded him of a distant memory or a forgotten feeling. The awareness of these reactions fueled her performance, giving her strength and courage she did not know she possessed. She realized that this was what music was truly about, not applause or recognition, but the ability to move people, to create a moment that would linger long after the last note had faded. Time seemed to stretch and bend around her. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours and seconds at the same time. She lost herself in the rhythm, the flow of notes, the rise and fall of melody and harmony. The music became a conversation, a silent dialogue between herself and the audience. She could sense their engagement, the way they leaned in, held their breath, let the sound wash over them. The room was no longer a restaurant filled with strangers. It had become a shared sanctuary, a place where emotion and expression were more important than status, wealth, or appearance. She remembered the stories her mother had told her, about how music could reach places words could not. She felt that truth in every note, in every pause, in every subtle shift in tempo. Her fingers danced over the keys, exploring variations, expressing nuances that conveyed feelings she had never been able to articulate otherwise. The room was silent but alive, vibrating with unspoken understanding and shared humanity. The richness of the experience took her breath away, making her feel both small and immense at the same time. As the piece reached its climax, she poured everything she had into the final chords, letting the notes resonate fully, filling the space with sound and emotion. There was a collective inhalation, a pause in the rhythm of life within the restaurant, as if everyone present was holding their breath in awe. The last note lingered, quivering softly, and then faded, leaving a silence that was not empty, but full of wonder and appreciation. The patrons remained still for a moment longer, not wanting to break the spell, before a ripple of applause began, soft at first, then growing steadily into genuine, heartfelt recognition. She opened her eyes slowly, seeing the smiles, the nods, the glimmer of emotion in faces she had only served before. She felt a wave of relief and happiness wash over her, not from the applause itself, but from the knowledge that she had reached them, that her music had touched their hearts. The manager approached, eyes wide with admiration, offering a quiet, sincere compliment. Other staff members came closer, some smiling, some shaking their heads in awe. And yet, amidst all the attention, she remained focused on the feeling that had carried her through the performance. The joy of creating, the connection with her audience, the pure expression of self through music. After a few moments, she continued to play, softly, exploring melodies with no need to impress, no need for perfection. The music became a private conversation again, a gentle reflection, a moment of solace for herself and for anyone willing to listen. She played with freedom, letting her emotions guide her fingers, enjoying the flow without concern for evaluation. The room, though still filled with patrons, felt like it belonged to her in that moment, a space where she could express herself fully and authentically. By the end of her performance, she felt transformed. The fear that had gripped her earlier had been replaced by confidence and a profound sense of accomplishment. She realized that this experience had changed her, if only slightly, but in ways that mattered deeply. She had taken a risk, faced uncertainty, and allowed herself to be vulnerable in front of others. And in doing so, she had created something beautiful. The reactions of the guests, the quiet moments of reflection, the smiles and nods of appreciation. All of it reinforced the truth that her music had value, that her passion had meaning. As the night progressed and the restaurant began to quiet down, she returned to the piano alone, letting her fingers explore melodies once more. This time, there was no audience, no expectations, only the freedom to play and create. She felt lighter, more complete, as if a part of her that had been waiting in the shadows had finally been acknowledged. The music, which had been a private comfort for so long, had become a bridge, connecting her to the world beyond the restaurant, reminding her that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. In those quiet moments, as the final echoes of her notes lingered in the empty room, she understood something important. Music was not just about skill or talent. It was about courage, expression, and the willingness to share a piece of oneself. And in that small, unexpected evening, she had done just that. The piano had become more than an instrument. It had become a witness, a companion, and a doorway to something larger, something meaningful, something that could touch hearts and create memories that would last far beyond the confines of the restaurant walls. The night had deepened, and the restaurant felt quieter, as if holding its breath in anticipation. The patrons, though wealthy and accustomed to fine dining, seemed drawn toward the corner where the grand piano sat, polished and inviting. She approached it with a calm that surprised her, the nervousness of earlier giving way to a focused determination. The weight of the moment pressed on her, but it was no longer heavy with fear. It was heavy with potential, with the promise of creating something unforgettable. She seated herself, took a slow breath, and let her fingers hover above the keys. In that pause, she felt the collective attention of the room settle upon her, silent and expectant. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself, and then began. The first notes were soft, almost tentative, floating gently into the air. They carried a delicate beauty, drawing the eyes and ears of the patrons in. Conversations dimmed, chairs shifted quietly, and all around, people stopped what they were doing to listen. She felt the room settle into her music, as though the sound itself had the power to quiet the bustling activity. The melody was simple at first, a gentle introduction, but it was full of emotion, every note imbued with her heart and her long-hidden passion. Each chord seemed to weave a story, a narrative that invited the audience into her world. She allowed herself to become fully immersed in the music. Her fingers moved with confidence now, the notes flowing naturally, guided by years of practice and countless hours of quiet dedication. As the melody built, she felt a subtle energy pass through the room, a shift in atmosphere that was tangible. Guests who had been preoccupied with their own conversations or meals now leaned forward, eyes wide, listening intently. The elegance and wealth that usually created a distance between her and the patrons seemed to dissolve, replaced by a shared experience, a moment of connection that transcended social boundaries. The music grew more complex, shifting through variations and harmonies that required careful attention and skill. She let the melodies rise and fall, moving seamlessly from gentle passages to more intense, emotionally charged sections. Her heart pounded with excitement and focus, but she remained centered, her mind completely absorbed in the act of creating. Each note was deliberate, each pause purposeful, and the audience responded in kind. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, attuned to the subtle nuances, the ebb and flow of emotion that she poured into the performance. A small child sat quietly, eyes fixed, on her hands as they danced across the keys. The child's fascination was mirrored by a couple at the next table, who exchanged glances, their expressions softened by the unexpected beauty of the music. Even older patrons, accustomed to a life of luxury and fine experiences, leaned in slightly, captivated by the authenticity and emotion emanating from her performance. She noticed these reactions and felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was a confirmation that music, in its purest form, could touch hearts regardless of age, wealth, or status. The crescendo approached, and she allowed herself to fully express the depth of feeling that had been building within her for years. The melodies became richer, more intricate, each note resonating with emotion and intention. She lost herself in the flow, aware of the audience only as a channel for her music's message. The room was utterly silent now, every ear attuned to the sound, every soul present and attentive. It was a rare and beautiful silence, not born of expectation, but of complete immersion. Even the usually restless staff paused, captivated, as if the music had cast a spell over the entire space. In those moments, she felt a profound connection with the people around her. The boundaries that often separated them, the wealth, the status, the formality of the setting were gone. Here, in this shared experience, they were united by the simple, universal language of music. She could sense the emotions passing through them. Wonder, nostalgia, curiosity, and perhaps even a quiet joy. She did not need to see or hear them respond. She could feel it in the energy that filled the room, a subtle vibration that matched the intensity of her playing. Her mind briefly wandered to the lessons of her childhood, the quiet afternoons spent at home with her mother, the hours of practice and perseverance. She remembered the struggles, the doubts, the moments of discouragement, and she felt gratitude for every single one of them. Each had led her to this moment, this extraordinary evening where she was no longer just a waitress, but a creator, an artist, a storyteller. The piano had become an extension of herself, a voice that spoke not only to the room, but to her own soul. She was telling a story, one that could not be captured in words, only in the gentle rise and fall of melody, the subtle shifts in tempo, and the delicate expression of emotion through sound. The final section of the piece approached, and she allowed herself to let the music reach its peak. The notes soared, cascading across the keys with power and grace, filling every corner of the room with a resonance that seemed almost tangible. She could feel the audience leaning in collectively, holding their breath, swept away by the emotion and beauty of the performance. In that moment, she realized the true impact of what she was doing. Music was not just a personal refuge, a secret passion. It was a force that could captivate, move, and transform. It had the power to create a space where everyone present could experience something profound, even if only for a fleeting moment. Then, as she played the final chord, she held it, letting it resonate fully, filling the room with a lingering warmth and depth. The silence that followed was profound, complete, and reverent. No one spoke immediately, no one moved. The room was suspended in the aftermath of the music, a collective pause to absorb and reflect on what had just occurred. It was a silence that carried weight, emotion, and appreciation, a silence that spoke louder than any words could. She allowed herself to breathe, feeling a mix of relief, joy, and quiet pride. The audience had received her music with open hearts, and in return, she felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known. Slowly, the silence gave way to soft, tentative applause. One by one, guests began to clap, some hesitant at first, unsure of how to respond to something so moving, and others with immediate warmth and enthusiasm. The sound grew, echoing through the room, swelling into a genuine recognition of the effort, courage, and artistry she had displayed. Faces lit up with smiles, some glistening with unshed tears, others nodding in quiet admiration. She looked around, absorbing the reactions, and felt a deep sense of connection and accomplishment. For the first time, she realized that her music had a tangible impact, that her passion could resonate beyond herself and touch the lives of others. The manager approached quietly, his expression one of awe and appreciation. "That was incredible," he said simply, his voice filled with sincerity. Other staff members joined in, offering congratulations and praise, but she remained humble, focusing more on the shared experience than the recognition. The joy came from the act itself, from the courage to step forward and share something personal and powerful, and from the realization that she had done so successfully. Later, when the restaurant had emptied and the night was calm, she returned to the piano alone. This time there was no audience, no pressure, no expectation. The keys felt familiar, welcoming, and she allowed herself to explore melodies freely, expressing emotions without restraint. The music flowed naturally, a personal reflection of the evening's journey, of the courage it took to play, and the impact it had created. In the quiet of the empty restaurant, she felt a profound sense of peace, a reminder that her passion and dedication had value beyond measure. That night, as she walked home under the gentle glow of streetlights, she felt a quiet transformation within herself. She had faced fear, embraced opportunity, and allowed herself to shine in a way that was authentic and meaningful. The echoes of the evening lingered, not just in the applause or the recognition, but in the realization that her music could touch lives, bridge gaps, and create moments of shared humanity. The piano had become more than an instrument. It had become a testament to her courage, her passion, and her ability to connect with the world through something profoundly beautiful. The night had finally come to a close, the last guests leaving with quiet murmurs of appreciation and lingering smiles from the unexpected performance. She stood beside the grand piano, her fingers brushing the keys one last time, feeling the soft echo of the music she had played. The room, now empty and still, seemed to hold the memory of the evening, as if it had absorbed every note, every emotion, and kept them close. She took a deep breath, her heart still racing with a mixture of exhilaration and relief. The experience had changed something within her, something that she could feel deep in her chest and in the tips of her fingers. The staff gathered to tidy the restaurant, moving with the rhythm of closing tasks, but their eyes often found her, lingering on the piano with admiration. Compliments were exchanged, smiles shared, and quiet acknowledgments of what had occurred. Some guests had even left notes, small cards of thanks, praising not just her skill but the courage it had taken to perform. She felt a warmth spread through her, not from the attention itself, but from the knowledge that her music had made a genuine connection. For so long, she had wondered if her passion was worth sharing, if it could touch anyone outside the quiet of her own home. Tonight, the answer had been given in the simplest and most profound way. As she walked home under the gentle glow of streetlights, the cool night air brushed against her face, carrying with it a sense of calm and clarity. She replayed the evening in her mind, each moment, each note, each subtle reaction of the patrons. It was a vivid tapestry of memory, stitched together with emotion and sound. She thought about the nervous anticipation before she had begun, the tentative first notes, and the gradual unfolding of confidence and connection. She remembered the silence that had settled over the room, the way people had listened, rapt, caught in the spell of the music. That silence, she realized, had been the most powerful response, more than applause or compliments, because it was genuine, unspoken, and full of presence. Her mind wandered to the future, imagining what could come next. Perhaps she would play again in the restaurant or elsewhere, and maybe opportunities she had never considered would open up. She felt a quiet hope, a sense that something significant had begun tonight. Yet she also knew that the value of what had occurred was not only in external opportunities but in the affirmation of her own courage and skill. She had dared to step forward, to share her talent, and the world had responded in kind. That realization carried a deep satisfaction, one that could not be measured in applause or recognition alone. She thought about the guests who had been touched by her music, the couple holding hands, the small child with wide eyes, the older patrons with softened expressions. All of them had experienced something real and intimate, even if for a brief moment. That connection, fleeting yet profound, was a testament to the power of music and to the value of sharing one's passion openly. She realized that these moments, often small and unexpected, were the ones that created lasting impressions and memories. It was a humbling thought, and yet it filled her with pride and joy. The following days brought a subtle change in her life. She returned to the restaurant, performing her usual duties with the same dedication. But there was a quiet shift in how she carried herself. There was an inner confidence now, a sense that she had crossed a threshold, proving to herself that she could face fear and step into the unknown. She noticed small things differently: the soft glint of sunlight on polished silverware, the careful placement of dishes, the smiles of guests who recognized her by name. These ordinary moments now carried a touch of magic, a reminder that life could hold extraordinary experiences within the familiar. Colleagues began to treat her with renewed respect, noticing her composure and the subtle strength she radiated. The manager occasionally asked her to play the piano during quieter shifts, and though the performances were smaller and more private, they carried the same depth of emotion. Guests who had been present during the unforgettable night often lingered near the piano, quietly hoping to hear her play again. She began to understand that the courage to share her talent had created a ripple effect, not only in the hearts of the patrons but in the atmosphere of the restaurant itself. Music had the power to transform spaces, to elevate moods, and to foster connections that transcended ordinary social boundaries. She also reflected on her personal growth. The act of performing had taught her valuable lessons about fear, vulnerability, and self-expression. She had learned that true courage was not the absence of fear but the willingness to act despite it. She had discovered that her passion could serve as a bridge to others, a way to communicate beyond words. These insights became part of her daily life, influencing how she approached challenges, relationships, and opportunities. The experience had expanded her understanding of herself and the impact she could have on the world. Word of her talent began to spread subtly among the regular patrons, some of whom mentioned her performance in polite conversations, others recommending the restaurant to friends with a special note about the piano music. She remained humble, focusing on the joy of playing rather than the recognition it brought. Each time she sat at the piano, she remembered the silent faces, the rapt attention, the collective breath held in awe. That memory continued to inspire her, reinforcing the importance of authenticity, dedication, and courage in pursuing one's passion. She also realized the importance of seizing opportunities, even when they arrived unexpectedly. The chance to perform had come without warning, and her willingness to embrace it had transformed an ordinary evening into something extraordinary. This lesson extended beyond music, encouraging her to approach other aspects of life with the same openness and bravery. She understood that small decisions, small acts of courage, could lead to significant change, not only in her own life but in the lives of those around her. As weeks passed, she continued to play when opportunities arose, each performance strengthening her confidence and skill. The piano became not just a tool for expression, but a symbol of possibility, resilience, and connection. She began to dream more boldly, considering paths she had never dared to explore. Thoughts of pursuing further musical education or participating in community performances began to take shape, no longer constrained by fear or self-doubt. The experience had planted a seed of ambition and hope that grew steadily, nurtured by each note played and each audience touched. Yet, amidst all the potential and possibility, she remained grounded. She knew that life would continue to present challenges, that not every moment would be filled with applause or recognition. But she had discovered a core truth. The act of sharing her passion, of expressing herself fully and authentically, was its own reward. Each time she played, she connected with something deeper within herself and with others, creating moments of beauty, understanding, and shared humanity. One evening, as she closed the restaurant and walked home, she paused beneath the soft glow of a street lamp. The memory of the night when the room had fallen silent came back vividly. She smiled softly, remembering the expressions, the stillness, the quiet acknowledgement of something profound. That night had changed her perspective, revealing the depth of her own courage and the far-reaching impact of her music. It reminded her that even in ordinary spaces and everyday life, extraordinary moments were possible, waiting for someone willing to take a risk and follow their passion. The piano remained a central part of her life, a source of solace, expression, and connection. She continued to serve guests with dedication, but now with an added layer of self-assurance, a quiet understanding of her own value and potential. Music had opened doors, not only in the world around her but within herself, revealing strengths, emotions, and possibilities she had not fully recognized before. Each performance, each note, became a reaffirmation of the courage it took to share her gift and the joy it could bring to others. In time, she began to see her life in a new light. The ordinary routines of work and daily life were now infused with meaning, connected by the threads of passion, courage, and creativity. She understood that while recognition and opportunity were wonderful, the true reward lay in the act of sharing her music, in the moments of genuine connection it created. The experience had given her a new sense of purpose, a reminder that small acts of bravery and authenticity could lead to extraordinary outcomes. She often reflected on the journey, from the quiet afternoons of childhood learning piano to the unexpected night when the restaurant fell silent in awe of her performance. The path had been filled with challenges, doubts, and moments of fear, yet each step had contributed to the growth and transformation she experienced. The story of that night became a personal anchor, a testament to the power of perseverance, passion, and courage. It reminded her that even ordinary people could create extraordinary moments if they embraced their talents and faced their fears. In the end, she carried the memory of that evening with her always, a source of inspiration, strength, and joy. The room had fallen silent, but in that silence, something profound had been communicated. A message of beauty, connection, and human spirit. She had discovered the transformative power of sharing her passion, the quiet magic that comes from daring to step forward and express oneself authentically. And in that discovery, she found not only her voice as a musician, but also a deeper understanding of herself and the world around her.